He stood in the doorway, his hand on the frame, as if the wood could hold him steady. The afternoon light fell across his face, soft and tired. His voice did not rise. It sank like a stone in a deep pond. "Mom, please stay out of this house forever." I did not speak. I felt the words settle in my chest, heavy and warm, like a bowl I could not put down. He was not cruel. He was careful. I could hear the care in the way he breathed after he said it, as if he wanted to catch the words back, but knew he could not. I nodded. I remember the small sound of my keys in my bag when I turned to go. "Before I go on, may I ask you something, gently, the way I would with a friend over a cup of tea? Before I begin, my dear friends, would you do me a small favor? Smash that like button right now. Subscribe to this channel and drop a comment telling me where you're watching from. It helps more than you know, and it makes me feel like we are sitting together. Thank you for listening with a soft heart. I want to share this with care." I once thought that sentence was the end of the story. It sounded like a door closing forever, and I felt it as loss. But later, on a day with a small roof leak and a kind roofer, I stepped into their attic and found something I did not expect. It was not money. It was not a secret hidden to deceive. It was a room of quiet, and it changed the way I understood my son's pain and my own. I will tell you what I found and why it mattered. I will not make it dramatic. This is not a tale of shouting or breaking things. It is a story about love and how love can hold too tight when it is afraid. If you have a blanket or a warm drink, bring it close. Let us breathe together and go back to where all of this began. My name is not so important as the role I held for most of my life. I am a mother. I became a mother and a father both after my husband passed away when Daniel was still small enough to tuck under my arm. He would lean his head on my side when we walked through the market, his shoes tapping out a fast rhythm on the floor. We did not have much, but we had our kitchen table, our old wooden spoon, and the quiet promise that we would make a life anyway. Grief sat with us for a long time. It had a chair at the table. In the early years, I learned to stretch rice and beans into meals that tasted like care. Daniel learned to grate cheese without scraping his knuckles. We made lists: what to buy, what to fix, what could wait. He watched me turn coupons into dinners, and I watched him grow out of his shoes one summer, almost overnight. We built our days on small routines. I woke him for school and packed a sandwich wrapped in wax paper. He did his homework at the kitchen counter while I chopped onions and told him silly stories about his father's quiet jokes. On Saturdays, we took a bus to the library and came back with books that smelled like paper and dust and hope. We learned to fix a leaky tap by watching a video and laughing when the water sprayed us both. He was a gentle boy. He liked order. He liked knowing there would be soup on Sunday and a walk after dinner when the weather was kind. As he grew older, he learned to fold laundry in thirds because that was how his father did it. He would hold up a towel and say, "Like this, Mom?" And I would nod and feel something open in my chest, a lightness that came from being needed. By the time he went to college, we had a handful of words that were ours. We could say blue bowl, and both remember the night we dropped it and laughed as it rolled under the fridge. We could say bus bench, and remember the long talk we had when he told me he was scared of leaving home. After he moved into his first apartment, we kept our evening call. I would make tea and wait for his number to light up my phone. I made soup every Sunday. It was our thread, sometimes chicken with rice, sometimes a pot of lentils with carrots and thyme. I would cook enough for 2 households, then carry a container to his place, smiling at the warmth against my palms. I might dust a little while I was there or wipe a counter. I would straighten a picture frame that leaned and feel that small, deep joy. Care can look like a clean surface. It felt like love. When I met Sarah, it was at that same kitchen table, only this time in his apartment. She came with a small bouquet from the market, tied with string. She had kind eyes. She wore a blue sweater and tucked her hair behind her ear when she laughed. Her handwriting was neat and round. She wrote a thank you card after that first dinner and slid it under my door, and I kept it on my nightstand for a week. I liked her. She listened when I spoke about Daniel's childhood, and she did not rush to add her own story. She helped me plate dessert and whispered, "This is delicious," in a way that made me blush like a girl. When I asked if she liked lemon bars, she smiled. "I love them," she said, and her voice was simple and true. I decided without saying it that I would do my best to be a good mother-in-law. My version of best was a full basket. I baked. I brought containers with labels. I sewed a curtain for their small kitchen window because the afternoon sun was sharp there. I wrote down my simple recipes on index cards and tied them with a ribbon. I showed Sarah how I make rice fluffy and how I keep cilantro in a glass with water, like flowers, so it lasts a little longer. When Daniel and Sarah married, we had a small celebration in a hall with fairy lights. I cried a quiet cry. I hugged her mother and we both agreed without many words that our children were good together. The next month, in the spirit of being helpful, I offered to organize their kitchen. Just to make it easier, I said, already rolling up my sleeves. I moved the pots to a lower shelf. I put the spices in a line by height. I labeled a bin snacks. Sarah thanked me. She is a polite person. "This looks nice," she said. Her smile held, but I saw in her eyes a question I did not name. I was proud of how neat everything looked. I left 2 trays of lasagna in the freezer just in case and a note about reheating. When Daniel called me that night and said, "Thanks, Mom," my heart lifted again. I told myself I had found my place in their new life. I have a phrase I use when I am certain. "That is how I do it." I said it often. "That is how I do it," when I folded their dish towels in thirds. "That is how I do it," when I tucked the cutting board into the cabinet upright to keep it dry. "That is how I do it," when I put a jar of homemade sauce in the back of their fridge, even if they had planned a different dinner. In my mind, I was giving them my best. I did not see how my best sat on top of their own ways. The first request for space came very gently. It was a slow afternoon. I had dropped by with a basket of fruit and a new curtain rod. Sarah poured tea and set the cups on coasters. She looked at me with those clear eyes and said, "We appreciate your help. We are trying to build our way of doing things." Her voice did not have any bite. It was steady and kind. I smiled. "Of course," I said. "I understand." I did understand with my mind. I did not yet understand with my hands. My hands had learned to show love by doing. They itched when I sat too long. That night when I got home, I washed the same 3 bowls twice just to feel calm. I lay in bed and told myself, "You will give them space. You will wait to be asked." I tried. I did better in small ways. I texted before visiting. "Do you need anything from the store?" I would ask. Sometimes I did not wait for the answer before buying the milk and the bread because I wanted to be ready. When I was in their home, I kept my hands on my lap for a while. But if Daniel stepped out to take a call, I would rise and wipe the counter without thinking. It felt like breathing. It felt like love. One spring, after a heavy storm that moved across the city like a gray blanket, their street flooded ankle deep. Branches fell. Power lines hissed. When the water went down, I called Daniel to check on them. The next day, he came by my place with a small envelope and a quiet face. He handed me a spare key, heavy and warm in my palm. "Only for emergencies," he said, clearly and kindly. "I trust you, Mom." Trust can feel like a medal. I held the key on my kitchen table for a long time that evening. I turned it over once, twice, listening to its small metallic sound. I told myself I would honor his words. I put it on a dish by my door next to my own keys and a tiny wooden bird my husband had carved long ago. When I looked at it, I felt both proud and calm. He trusted me. I would be careful. After that, life moved in its usual slow way. I made soup on Sundays and carried the container like a gift. Sometimes I would dust a bookshelf while we waited for the oven to beep. Sometimes I would move a bowl from one shelf to another, where I could reach it more easily if I needed to help. It felt like care. I told myself small touches were harmless. I was happy with their little home. It had light in the mornings and soft lamp glow at night. There was a plant by the window that always turned its leaves toward the sun. Their coffee mugs did not match, and that made me smile. Every time I let myself in when they were already expecting me, I wiped my shoes carefully on their mat as if to say, "I know this is your place. I will be gentle." On some evenings, I would sit in my car outside their building for a minute before going in, listening to the hum of the street. I would think about how far we had come from that small kitchen table with the old wooden spoon. Daniel had a life he had built with his own hands and heart. I told myself I was a supporting player now. Then I would pick up the soup, ring the bell, and feel that same warm lift when the door opened and my son said, "Hi, Mom." It felt like being needed, in a small, everyday way. It felt like home, even when it wasn't mine. It began with small things like most changes do. One afternoon, I was passing their street on my way back from the market. I had a bag of oranges and a box of tea. I told myself, "You are nearby," and I rang the bell without sending a message first. When Sarah opened the door, I smiled. "I was nearby," I said, as if that explained everything. She let me in. She always did. She is a kind person. We had tea in their small living room, and I set the oranges in a bowl on the table. Daniel was at work, and the room felt quiet. I noticed a water ring on the coffee table and reached for a cloth. My hands went to work before my mind caught up. I wiped. I straightened. I asked how she was, and she said, "I'm fine, thank you." Another time, I came when they were not expecting me at all. I had made muffins and thought, "They are better fresh." I used my spare key to leave them on the counter. I did not stay. I left a note with a heart drawn at the bottom, and I went home. I told myself it was harmless because I meant well. I did not consider how it might feel to come home and know someone had been there. One morning, when I had the apartment to myself for a few minutes before dinner, I opened their pantry to get a jar of tomatoes. The shelves were full of different labels and jars. I felt my chest tighten a little, the way it does when things are not where my hands expect them to be. I took out my label maker from my bag, almost without thinking. I told myself I was making it easier for them. I made neat labels: pasta, rice, beans, snacks, baking. I lined up the jars with their faces out like soldiers in a row. I moved the cereal to the second shelf where I would have put it if it were my kitchen. When Sarah came in, she paused. Her shoulders rose and settled only a little, but I saw it. She said, "Thank you," with a small smile. Her voice was polite. Her eyes were careful. We had a soft conversation about it the next day. Daniel called me while he walked to the train. The wind made his words sway in and out. "Mom," he said gently, "would you mind texting before you come? We love you. We just need to know." I stood by my kitchen window and watched the light move across the sink. "Of course, sweetheart," I said. My mouth knew what to say. My heart worried I would be left behind if I waited to be invited. I tried to remember to text. I wrote notes to remind myself. Still, I slipped. I told myself I would just drop something quickly or tidy one little thing. I told myself I had keys for a reason. I told myself love could smooth over small missteps. Each time, the room felt a bit tighter, as if the air had learned to hold its breath. Then one quiet evening, Daniel and Sarah sat across from me at my table with soft eyes and a secret they could not contain. They held hands. Daniel cleared his throat. Sarah smiled down at her lap and then up at me. "We are expecting," she said, simple and clear. Her hand rested on her stomach, light as a feather. I felt a wave rush through me, joy and hope and memory all at once. I cried. I covered my mouth with my hand and cried the kind of tears that come from a full heart. I thought about the day I held Daniel for the first time, the smell of his hair, the weight of a small head on my shoulder. I got up and hugged them both. "Oh, my baby," I said, and I meant my son, but the words came out like a claim, reaching forward into a future that was not mine to own. From that day, my mind started to build a room. I imagined paint colors, soft yellow maybe, or a calm gray. I imagined a little bookshelf with tiny storybooks. I imagined a mobile of stars that turned slowly in the air. I went to the market and picked up a pair of tiny socks because they were on sale and soft as clouds. I held them to my cheek and smiled. I bought a blue blanket with little stitched moons. I kept it folded in tissue paper under my bed, as if I needed to hide my hope so it would not be spoiled by light. I made a list of names I loved, names I had kept in my heart since Daniel was a boy. I wrote them on an index card and carried it in my bag. When we sat together for dinner one night, I said a few out loud. "What do you think about Emma?" I asked, smiling. "Or maybe Jacob after your father, and the room could be a soft green. Green is calm. I could sew curtains with small animals. I have the pattern. My friend used it for her granddaughter. We can put the crib by the window so the light is gentle in the morning." Sarah smiled and nodded, but something in her face went still, like a lake without ripples. She sipped her water. She did not say much. I did not notice at first that when I said my baby, even as a slip, a quiet passed between us. Daniel glanced at her and then at me. He changed the subject to the soup, and I followed him there because I loved to tell him how I seasoned it. The weeks went by. I made a little collection of things in a drawer. The socks, another blanket, a soft hat. I sent Sarah pictures of nursery ideas I saw online. She often replied with a heart and a thank you, but not with the same breathless planning I had inside me. I took that as sadness or nerves. I decided I would cheer her up with surprise plans. So I organized a small shower at my home. I did not ask how she wanted it. I told myself surprises are sweet. I made a guest list with neighbors and a few of my friends. I baked lemon bars and a cake with little sugar flowers. I set up games I found on the internet with cards and guessing. I draped ribbon across my living room. When I told Daniel, his voice had a pause in it, but he said, "Okay, Mom." On the day of the shower, Sarah looked tired. She wore a soft dress and sat near the window with her hands folded. People hugged her and told her stories that were meant to be funny but also brought worry. I was busy. I carried plates and told people where to sit. I explained the games in a bright voice. When I saw Sarah sitting quietly, I brought her water and a small plate and said, "Eat a little. It's good for the baby." At one point, I looked over and saw Daniel watching me with a furrow between his brows. He was not angry. He looked like he was trying to solve a puzzle. He came to my side and said in a low voice, "Maybe we keep it simple, Mom." I nodded and took a breath, but then someone asked me a question about the cake, and my hands went to work again. The party was sweet, but it felt heavy, as if we had tried to lift more than our arms could hold. Not long after that, there was a doctor visit. They did not invite me, and of course they did not need to. They came home with quiet faces. Daniel called me from their car. His voice was soft like cloth. He said, "We lost the baby." I felt my knees go weak. I sat down on the floor by my kitchen chair because the ground felt closer and safer than the air. "I'm so sorry," I whispered. I wanted to reach across the distance and catch their grief in my hands as if I could take some of it away. I wanted to do something, anything. After we hung up, my heart pounded. I felt a need to gather people to ask for help from every corner I knew. I opened the family group chat. I wrote a long message about what had happened, asking for prayers, asking for light, telling them the weeks and the words the doctor had used. I thought I was building a circle of care. When I pressed send, I did not think about privacy. I did not think about how Sarah might feel reading messages from aunts and cousins she barely knew, saying, "I am so sorry," with details she had not chosen to share. I thought of myself as a rope thrower, trying to pull them to shore. I did not see that I had made their pain public without their permission. After that, their door closed. They did not stop loving me. They stopped answering as quickly. Texts became short. "Thank you," or "We are resting." I checked my phone often. I wrote again, "I am here. What can I bring? Have you tried this?" I sent articles. I suggested herbal tea. I showed up and left food on their porch. I could not stand the thought of them alone in their grief without my hands there to help. Days went by. The silence felt like a heavy blanket. I walked around my apartment and straightened things that did not need straightening. I watered my plant twice by mistake. I started soup at 9 a.m. just to have something to stir. When the sun rose high and the day grew hot, I worried about their apartment. What if the food spoils? I thought. What if they cannot bring themselves to cook? One afternoon, I put on my shoes and picked up a pot of soup, still warm and smelling of garlic and thyme. I told myself I would be quick. I told myself I would leave it on the counter and go. I brought my spare key. When I reached their door, I hesitated for one breath, then I let myself in. The air was cool. The sunlight came in through the blinds in thin lines. I set the pot on the stove to keep it safe. I saw a little mess on the counter, spoons, a mug, a wrapper, and I could not leave it. I cleaned the small things, wiped the surface, put the mug in the sink. I saw that the bowl I had moved weeks ago was back in its old place. My hand lifted it and set it where I liked it without thinking. Then I wrote a note. "Eat while it's warm, love you." I drew a small heart. When I stepped outside, I sat on the top step and let the air touch my face. I told myself I had helped. I waited for a little while and then I stood to go. As I reached the sidewalk, a car turned the corner. Daniel pulled up and parked. He saw me and raised his hand. He looked tired. His eyes had shadows. He walked toward me with slow steps. "Hi, Mom," he said. His voice was soft. He looked at the door and then at me. "Were you inside?" "I brought soup," I said. "I left it on the stove so it would not spoil outside. I tidied a little, just a little." I tried to smile. My hands twisted together without my permission. He took a breath. He swallowed. "Mom, we need space. We need you to trust us to handle this." "I am just trying to help," I said. The words came out small. I do not know how to stand here and do nothing." He looked at me, and I saw so much love in his eyes. I also saw a wall he was trying to build to keep his family safe. He spoke slowly, as if each word was a careful step on thin ice. "Please stay out of this house forever." The sentence landed in the air and did not move. There was no anger in it. There was ache. His face did not harden. It softened, like someone who is very tired and does not want to be unkind. I felt a sensation I cannot quite name. It was like someone had taken a warm stone and set it in the center of my chest. I nodded. I did not argue. I did not say all the things that rose in my throat. I said only, "Okay?" I touched his arm for 1 second, then let go. I walked away step by step, holding the hurt as if it might spill if I moved too fast. I went home and sat on my sofa. I looked at my hands. They were still for once. The house felt very quiet. That night I lay in bed and stared at the ceiling. I heard the clock in my kitchen tick. I thought of all the times I had moved a bowl or wiped a counter. I thought of my label maker. I thought of the group message. I thought of Sarah's still face when I said my baby. I felt regret arrive like rain. It did not shout. It tapped on the windows, gentle and steady. In the days that followed, I tried not to reach for the phone every hour. I made tea and did not drink it. I stood by the window and watched the neighbor's cat walk the fence with delicate steps. I washed dishes that were already clean. I told myself that love can wait. I told myself that if I wanted to be part of their life, I had to learn a new way to be. But inside, everything felt hollow, like a room after a party, ribbons still hanging. The air changed. Silence had a shape. It was the space between my chair and the door. It was the pause before I reached for my phone and then pulled my hand back. Days turned into weeks, and I learned the rhythm of my apartment without visitors. I watered my plants on schedule and watched the leaves lift toward the light. I spoke less. When I cleaned, it was my own counters I wiped. The spare key sat on the small dish by my door, and sometimes I held it in my palm and then put it back down. I tried to keep busy with simple things. I took slow walks around the block. I noticed a house on the corner with a new coat of paint. I noticed an old man who always fed the birds at 8 in the morning and 4 in the afternoon. The world went on doing what it always does. Inside me, things were quiet but not peaceful. I would fold a towel and think of Daniel's hands doing the same. I would hear a car door close and think, is that them? One morning, my phone rang. It was Mrs. Patel, the neighbor across from Daniel and Sarah. She has a gentle voice and a way of noticing without prying. "Hello, dear," she said. "I am sorry to bother you. There is water coming down the gutter like a small waterfall, even though it has not rained. Maybe a leak." I felt my stomach tighten. I thanked her. After we hung up, I stood with the phone in my hand for a moment. I did not want to cross any lines. I did not want to ignore something that could cause harm. I took a breath and sent Daniel a message. "There may be a leak at the roof line," I wrote. "I can call a roofer if you want." Hours passed. I cleaned the kitchen sink. I cut a lemon and let its smell fill the room. I set my phone on the table and turned it over so I would not stare at the screen. When it buzzed, my heart jumped. Daniel's message was simple. "Mr. Ruiz is coming at 2. If you can be there, please let him in." I read it twice. The words were clear. He had given me a small job. It felt like someone opening a window a little bit to let in air. I wrote back, "I will be there, thank you." I did not add hearts or extra words. I looked at the clock and gave myself plenty of time to walk so I could arrive calm. At exactly 2 in the afternoon, I stood on their step. I did not touch the doorbell. I waited for the roofer to arrive so I would not be inside alone for longer than needed. Mr. Ruiz came in a truck with a ladder tied on top. He had kind eyes and a calm manner. "You must be Daniel's mother," he said. I nodded. "Thank you for coming," I said. "There may be a leak." We stepped inside together. The house smelled like lavender and clean laundry. A small fan hummed in the corner. The light through the blinds made thin stripes on the floor. I held my hands together so I would not be tempted to touch anything that did not need touching. Mr. Ruiz looked up at the ceiling and pointed to a faint stain in one corner. "We need to check the attic," he said in a quiet, practical tone. He asked where the attic access was. I knew because I had seen the square panel in the hallway ceiling. I fetched the small step stool from the closet where they kept it. He unfolded his own ladder and placed it carefully. "I'll go up," he said. "Would you mind standing here to steady the ladder?" I appreciated his clear instructions. It gave my hands a purpose. When I climbed the first step to hand him a flashlight, warm air drifted down. Attics have a smell, the dry scent of wood and dust, like old paper in summer heat. Mr. Ruiz clicked the light and climbed. I held the ladder, feet braced, eyes on my hands. He moved slowly, his steps a soft rhythm above. "I see the trail," he called. "Might be the flashing by the vent. I'll check." He needed a bucket to catch the drip while he worked. He asked if there was one. I remembered a small blue bucket in the laundry closet. I brought it and handed it up. As I stood there, I let my eyes lift, just for a moment. The attic space was a faint glow of slanted light. I saw wooden beams, the belly of the roof, a line of insulation like a blanket worn thin. In one corner, near a beam, there was a pale paint swatch pinned to the wood with a thumbtack. It was a soft color, like the inside of a shell. Next to it lay a small strip of fabric with tiny stars. A shoebox sat nearby, its lid closed. Someone had written on it in neat letters, "Little one." The words were simple and spoke louder than any large sign could. My breath caught. My hand tightened on the ladder by reflex. I did not climb up. I did not move from my place. Mr. Ruiz shifted to another beam, measuring, and asked me to hold the flashlight at an angle so it bounced light up. I did, as steady as I could. He worked for a few minutes. He murmured to himself about nails and sealant. I watched the corner with the shoebox like I watch the horizon when I wait for a bus, aware, but not calling it closer. He asked for a rag. "Something to wipe my hands," he said. I looked around and saw a folded tarp near the ladder. I reached to pull it closer. When I did, the edge bunched and nudged the shoebox a little. It did not fall, but a small envelope slid from under the lid and floated down like a leaf. It landed near my shoe, face up. On the front, I saw Daniel's handwriting. I would know his letters anywhere. The envelope said, "To our baby." The words were ink on paper, but they felt alive, tender, private. My heart beat in my ears. I bent slowly and picked it up with both hands as if it might break. I did not mean to read it. The flap was not sealed. It had been opened before, maybe many times. I glanced down. I only saw the first line. It said, "We love you. We had a blue blanket waiting for you. I wish I could have taught you to tie your shoes." I felt a sound move up my throat and stop behind my teeth. It was not a cry. It was softer, like something folding. I closed the envelope with my fingertips and held it against my palm for a second, so gently it did not bend. Near the shoebox, I could see small things now that I knew how to look. A tiny sweater still wrapped in its paper, the tissue thin and crinkled at the edges. A small book about stars, with a cover that showed a child looking up at the night sky. The corner of a printout with the gray shapes of an ultrasound, dates typed at the top. A list of names on a torn piece of paper, written by two hands, some in Daniel's letters, some in Sarah's, a little heart next to one. I could also see another envelope beneath the first, with a different date. The dates made a line that told a longer story than anyone had told me out loud. It was not just one loss. It was more than one. Grief had its own small corner in their home, where it could be kept and tended and visited. They had made a quiet room in the attic for a quiet pain. My chest softened in a way I have trouble describing. The ache I had been carrying for myself, about being kept outside, about being told no, changed shape. It did not leave. It turned, like a person turning toward a window and seeing the view is wider than they thought. I saw now that my noise, even my loving noise, had filled a room that needed stillness. I saw that my hands, even when kind, had moved things that were not mine to move. I put the envelope back under the lid where it had been. I straightened the tarp I had bunched. I did not touch another thing. I stood there and felt the warm air around me, the dust motes floating in the light. I thought of the blue blanket under my bed. I thought of my index card with names. I thought of all the times I had said my baby, and I wished I had said your baby, and meant it with my whole self. Mr. Ruiz climbed down a little to tell me what he had found. "The flashing by the vent has a gap," he said. "I can seal it today. It should stop the leak. We'll keep an eye on it after the next rain." His hands were dusty. I handed him the rag and nodded. "Thank you," I said, and my voice sounded different to my own ears, lower, slower. He went up again to finish. I held the ladder and watched his boots. I did not let my eyes wander back to the corner. I did not need to. The attic had already told me what it wanted to tell me. After a while, he called down, "All set." He climbed carefully, step by step, and when he reached the bottom, I steadied the ladder as if it were a person. We put the ladder away and stood in the hallway. He wrote a small note on his pad and handed it to me. "This is what I did," he said. "If it leaks again, call me." I thanked him and walked him to the door. When the door closed, the house was very quiet. The fan still hummed. A clock ticked in the kitchen. I stood by the small table near the entrance. There was a dish there, the same kind of dish I had at home, for keys and coins. My spare key felt heavy in my pocket. I took it out and turned it in my palm. The metal was cool from the air. I thought about Daniel's words on the step. "Please stay out of this house forever." I thought about the letter in the attic addressed to our baby. I set the key gently on the dish. It made the smallest sound, like a bell under a blanket. I took one of their small notepads from the drawer, the kind with a magnet on the back. I wrote in slow, careful letters, the way you write when you want each word to land where it should. "I will wait outside until you want me in. I am sorry. I love you." I placed the note next to the key. I stood for one more breath, letting the scent of lavender fill me. I looked around the room without moving anything. I let my eyes rest on the spot where their shoes were lined up, on the plant by the window, on a photo on the shelf of them standing by a lake, smiling into the sun. I felt both close and very far. Then I opened the door and stepped out. The afternoon light was warm. A bird called from a wire. I closed the door softly so it would not make a bang that might startle the quiet inside. I sat on the top step for a moment, not to linger but to steady myself. My hands were empty. My pockets were lighter. I felt the difference. As I walked down the path, I thought about love as a shape. I had been used to love as a basket I carried, full of food and help and plans. I had not known how to hold love as empty hands, open and ready, without grabbing. The attic had shown me a different way. It had not scolded me. It had not told me a lesson in loud words. It had shown me a small corner of the heart that needed silence and time. I reached the sidewalk and turned toward home. I did not look back. I did not send a message to say what I had done. I did not call to tell Daniel about the leak or the repair. I walked and felt each step, the way you feel the floor under your feet in a dark room. I told myself, "Wait, be gentle. Let them come to you when they are ready." At home, I put a kettle on the stove and set my cup on the counter. I did not make soup. I did not reach for my label maker. I sat at my table and placed my hands on the wood, palms down, as if I were blessing it. I closed my eyes and saw the envelope under the shoebox lid, the words to our baby, the small sweater, the book about stars. I whispered into my quiet kitchen, "I am sorry." The next day, I bought a small ribbon, nothing fancy. I put it in my drawer where I kept the blue blanket and the tiny hat. I did not take them out. I did not look at them. I left them there, folded and still, until the day someone else would decide. For the first time in a long time, I let love be patient in me, like a candle that burns low and steady, lighting a room without smoke. The day after I left the key and the note, I woke before the sun. The apartment was quiet, and the quiet felt honest. I made tea and stood by the window while the kettle cooled. My hands wanted to move, but I did not let them reach for a cloth or a list. I let them be still and felt how hard that was. By noon, I knew I needed help I did not yet have inside me. I called a clinic a friend had once mentioned and asked if someone could see me soon. The woman on the phone spoke with a calm voice and found me an appointment for the next day. I wrote the time down on the back of an old envelope. I set it under the magnet on my fridge, where I could not miss it. The therapist's office was small and clean. There was a plant in the corner with leaves like open hands. The man who greeted me had a gentle face. He said, "Please, call me Mr. Chen," and he showed me to a chair near the window. I sat and pressed my palms together in my lap so I would not twist my fingers. I told him my story in pieces. I told him about the soup, the labels, and the spare key. I told him about the attic and the shoebox and the letter addressed to our baby. I told him how my love wanted to rush into every room and fix every hurt. I said, "I do not know how to love without doing." He listened without interrupting. He leaned forward once and then leaned back, as if to give the space weight. When I stopped talking, he waited another moment before he spoke. He said, "Love can be strong and gentle at once." I felt the words settle like a blanket across my knees. I wrote that sentence down on a small notepad I had brought. I underlined it once. I read it back to him as if to tuck it into my memory. He nodded. He said, "Gentle does not mean absent. Gentle means careful. Strong does not mean forceful. Strong means steady." I let those words sink in too. We met again the week after. We talked about how my hands learned to love by doing when my husband died and Daniel was small. We talked about how I had been both a mother and a father, and how busy kept me safe from sorrow. He said, "Sometimes when the pain is deep, the doing is a raft." I agreed. He did not ask me to throw away the raft. He asked me to learn to float. At home, I began to practice small, quiet acts that did not cross any lines. I sent groceries by delivery once a week for a month. Eggs, bread, fruit, dry pasta, a small jar of honey. Nothing with a note that told them what to eat or when to eat. Each order had one line in the gift message: "Use what you like. No answer needed." I pressed send, and then I closed the app and turned my phone face down. I wanted to check the delivery truck as it moved across the map, but I stopped myself. I made tea. I sat with my book, even if I did not read. The first week I waited and wondered if they would accept it. The second week, I let the wondering be and did not follow it to a story. The third week I felt a little less like I was standing at a door, knocking. I also wrote a letter. I took out the good paper I use for special notes. I sat at my table with the window open so I could hear the city move. A bus sighing at the corner, footsteps on the stairs, a child laughing somewhere below. I wrote slowly, as if each line could be a hand placed gently on someone's shoulder. I began with what needed to be said most. "I am sorry I made your pain about my fear of being alone." I paused and let the ink dry on those words. Then I wrote, "I will not enter without your invitation." I meant it. I wrote, "If you want me to help, I will ask first. If you need space, I will give it." I added, "I will hold your story in silence, not in public." I read those lines out loud to myself, like a small promise. I added a few more sentences about love. I told them I would learn a new way, even if I learned slowly. I told them I understood if they needed time. Then I signed my name, folded the paper, and put it in an envelope. I wrote their names on the front, simple and clear. I did not walk it over and slip it under the door. I put a stamp on it and placed it in the blue mailbox at the end of my street. The sound of the envelope sliding inside felt like a bell rung softly. I stood there for a second with my hand on the cool metal, then I turned and went home. I cleaned the table where I had written the letter, and I left the rest of the day alone. In the days that followed, I made a few more changes. I opened the family group chat and wrote a short message. I shared something that was not mine to share. "I am sorry," I wrote. "Please do not ask Daniel and Sarah for details. If you want to support them, send love without questions." Then I muted the chat for a while and put my phone in a drawer. I told Mr. Chen what I had done. He nodded and said, "You are practicing a new kind of strength." His words were simple. They did not praise me like a child, and they did not scold me like a teacher. They met me where I was. He asked me to write down 3 times in a week when I wanted to act and chose to wait. He called it holding space, and I saw that space was not empty. It was full of care. Weeks passed. I cooked for one and learned to fill my evenings slowly, without rush. I found a book of short stories and read one each night. I ironed my curtains and trimmed a plant that had grown wild at the edge. I walked to the park in the late afternoon and watched the light turn gold near the pond. I waved at Mrs. Patel when I saw her. We spoke about the weather and the new shop on the corner, and nothing more. Then one evening, as I was washing a cup, my phone lit up on the counter. The message was from Daniel. "Mom, can we meet at the park tomorrow?" My hand trembled. I wiped it dry so I would not smudge the screen. I wrote back, "Yes, of course. What time suits you?" He told me 4 p.m. near the bench by the tall oak. I said, "I will be there." The next day, I went early. I sat on the bench and felt the wood warm under the sun. I watched a child throw pieces of bread to ducks, the pieces too big and the ducks eager anyway. The air smelled like cut grass. I folded and unfolded my hands. I reminded myself to breathe slow. I reminded myself I did not need to fill any silence with words. Daniel arrived first. He looked older, not in a bad way, but in the way a person looks when they have carried weight and found their feet again. He hugged me. It was a gentle hug, like someone returning to a room they had missed. We sat. We looked at the water for a while and let waves touch the edge of the pond and slide back. "I am sorry for the words I used," he said. He spoke without hurry. He looked at his hands as he said them, then up at me. "I wanted a door with a lock, not a wall forever." I felt my eyes fill, but I did not let the tears fall past my lash. I did not want to make him comfort me. I wanted to meet him where he stood. "You were protecting your home and your heart," I said. "You get to do that. I am sorry for not listening sooner." My voice was steady, and that made me grateful. He nodded, and a small smile moved at the corner of his mouth, shy as a bird. Sarah walked up then, quiet as a warm breeze. She had a soft scarf around her neck and eyes that looked like sleep had finally come back to her a little. She sat on my other side. For a moment, we did not speak. We listened to the ducks and the children and the low roll of a bicycle across the path. "I had to learn how to ask for what I needed too," she said. "Thank you for the letter." I turned and met her eyes. "You are welcome," I said, and I did not try to fill the space with explanations. It was enough. Her hand was on the bench between us, and I laid my hand near it, not touching until she turned her palm up. Then I put my hand in hers. "Daniel told me more about the attic," he said. "It was not just plans, it was goodbye notes." He looked at the water as he spoke. Not just paint colors, but the courage to try again and again. His voice did not shake. It had a quiet strength, the kind that grows in the dark. I held his hand with my free hand and gave it a soft squeeze. "I am here," I said. That was all. No advice. No list of things to do next. Just the simple truth, spoken like a small light that does not blind. We talked about boundaries the way some people talk about a garden plan, calm and practical. Daniel said, "Text before visiting, wait for yes." I nodded. "Text before visiting," I repeated. "Wait for yes," Sarah said. "No changes in our home unless asked." "No changes," I said. "Not even a spoon." "When we share pain," Daniel added, "please listen. No fixing, no posting, no group messages." "I will listen," I said. "No fixing, no posting, no group messages." We all smiled at the way I echoed him as if I were practicing a new language. In a way, I was. We set a Sunday call time. 5 o'clock, Sarah said. 5 is good, I said. I will make tea. We picked a start date. We put it in our calendars. I drew a tiny heart next to it on mine. Not to be sentimental, but to remind myself that love can be simple and scheduled, and that does not make it less real. That first week after the park, I felt both light and careful. I did not rush to their door. I did not send messages every morning. I did not fill the space with my plans. I let the days be days. On Sunday at 5, my phone rang right on time. We talked about easy things, work, weather, a new dish Sarah had tried. We ended with "I love you." The call was 20 minutes. It was perfect. We began to rebuild in steps that anyone passing by would have thought ordinary. Daniel texted, "Walk," one afternoon, and we went around the block together. We did not set a record. We stopped to smell a rose leaning over a fence. He touched my arm when he told me a funny story about a coworker. I laughed. The laughter felt new and familiar at the same time. Another day, I went to their place for a cup of tea. I waited outside until the door opened. I took off my shoes at the mat and did not move the mat 1 inch. I kept my hands on my cup and watched the light move across the floor. It made a stripe that drifted toward the bookshelf as the afternoon went on. I did not touch the books. I did not straighten the frames. I sat and listened to Sarah talk about a class she wanted to take. We made new rituals, small as buttons, easy to hold. In the evenings, if the sky looked beautiful, we sent each other photos of sunsets. Sometimes the colors were loud and full. Sometimes they were pale and thin. Either way, a picture would arrive, and the only answer needed was a heart. I learned the sweetness of a heart with no words. Sarah asked me for a recipe once for a soup I had made years before. I wrote it out in simple steps and sent it. I did not add tips she had not asked for. Later, she sent a photo of the pot and the steam, and I replied with "beautiful" and a heart. I did not ask if she had added enough salt. I trusted her hands. On the harder days, when the calendar turned to a month that held a memory, I did not send plans or invitations. I sent a single heart emoji in the morning, and then I waited. Sometimes, in the evening, a heart came back. Sometimes nothing came, and that was also fine. Mr. Chen had taught me that strong and gentle love can sit quietly in a room and fill it without sound. I found other ways to let my hands be useful without stepping into their space. I mended a sweater for a neighbor. I baked a cake for Mrs. Patel when her grandson visited. I volunteered one morning a week at the library, shelving books in the children's section. I wore soft shoes that did not squeak and felt the peace of putting a story where it belonged. Little by little, trust grew back like grass after winter. Daniel asked me one Saturday, "Would you like to come for dinner next week?" He added, "Come at 6. Ring the bell, we will cook. Will you bring dessert?" I wrote back, "I would love to, I will bring lemon bars." I felt happy to be asked. I felt proud to be given one simple job. At 6, I rang the bell and waited. When the door opened, the scent of roasted vegetables and thyme slipped out. I stepped in and placed the dessert on the counter. The kitchen looked lovely in the evening light. I folded my hands and stood back. I did not lift a spoon. Sarah handed me a small bowl of olives and said, "Will you set these on the table?" I smiled. "With pleasure," I said. We ate and told small stories. Daniel spoke about a project he had finished. Sarah described a book she liked. I shared a memory of Daniel as a boy, the one where he wore his red boots for a week in July because he loved the sound they made. We laughed softly, and the room felt easy. When we finished, Sarah and Daniel stood to clear the plates. "Would you like help with the dishes?" I asked. And then I waited. "No, thank you," Sarah said. "Sit and rest." So I sat with my tea and watched them move around the kitchen like dancers who had practiced, handing a plate, finding a towel. The urge to stand and join them rose and then passed. I breathed and let it go. On my way out that night, I paused at the door. "Thank you for having me," I said. Daniel hugged me. Sarah hugged me too. "Thank you for coming," she said. "Thank you for the lemon bars." On the walk home, the streetlights made soft pools on the pavement. I stepped in each pool like a child and thought how light can be generous and gentle at once. Our Sunday calls continued, and they became a sweet thread I could hold. Sometimes we talked for 15 minutes, sometimes for 40. We laughed more as the months went on. We remembered. We did not avoid the hard things, but we did not force them either. If a quiet came, we let it sit between us like a guest who did not need entertainment. There were still moments when my old habits woke up. Once, during a call, I heard a little sound in their sink and said, "That faucet sounds like it is dripping." Daniel said, "We'll take care of it." I almost offered to send a plumber, but I caught myself. I said, "Okay." It was a small word, but it felt like laying down a heavy bag I had been carrying. Another time, I found myself standing in a store aisle looking at a small pair of shoes, tiny and perfect. I felt my heart twist with both longing and love. I picked them up, and then I put them back. I did not need to bring that hope into their home without their ask. I went home and watered my plant. I watched the water sink into the soil and the leaves lift to meet the air. When I saw Mr. Chen again, I told him about these small choices. He smiled in that quiet way he had. "You are keeping your promise," he said, "to them and to yourself." I told him that sometimes waiting felt like not loving. He shook his head. "Waiting can be love," he said. "It can be the kind that says, 'I trust you to find your way. I am beside you, not in front.'" Months gathered themselves into a gentle season. One Saturday morning, my phone buzzed with a message from Sarah. "We are doing a little tidying and ran into the attic," she wrote. "If you are free, would you like to come by?" My hands were steady as I typed. "Yes, thank you for inviting me. What time?" She said, "Come at 10. I looked at the clock. It was 9. I took a breath. I did not rush. I changed my blouse and put on comfortable shoes. I brought nothing with me, not even a bag. Not a ribbon, not a box, not a plan. I walked to their home, rang the bell at 10, and waited. When the door opened, Sarah smiled and stepped aside. The air inside felt calm and kind. Daniel pulled down the attic ladder, and it came down in soft stages, wood against wood. We stood at the bottom and looked up. "We just want to look together," he said. "Not to erase, to tend." I nodded. "To tend," I repeated. The word felt right. We climbed, each step careful. The warm air met us. I smelled the wood and the faint, clean scent of lavender from below. The corner was the same, the pale paint swatch, the small strip of starry fabric. The shoebox marked "Little One." Sarah sat cross-legged on the floor near it. She opened the lid with both hands, slow and respectful. We did not speak. We did not need to. The quiet was not empty. It was full. She lifted the tiny sweater from its paper. Her fingers smoothed it along the sleeves. Daniel reached for the small book about stars and opened it to the first page. "The night is full of stories," he read, voice barely above a whisper. I felt my throat tighten and my heart soften. I sat beside them and did not move closer than they did. Sarah looked at me then. She held out the sweater. "Would you fold this with me?" she asked. My eyes filled. "Yes," I said. We laid it flat on the lid. We turned one sleeve, then the other. We folded the bottom up. It was like folding a prayer, simple and loving. We placed it back in the box together. Daniel took the letter that had rested under the lid. He held it for a moment. "We will keep this," he said softly. "Maybe we put it in a small box tied with a ribbon so it stays safe." I remembered the ribbon I had tucked into my drawer months ago. "I have a ribbon," I said. "I will bring it next time if you want." Sarah smiled. "We would like that," she said. We did not stay long. We did not rearrange the corner. We did not take anything away. We closed the lid gently. We breathed. Then we climbed down the ladder and stood in the hallway, close but not crowded. I felt the strange peace that comes when a room full of tears has been visited with soft hands and no words. A week later, I returned with a small ribbon in my pocket. It was simple, cream-colored, with a soft sheen. We went up to the attic again, only for a few minutes. Daniel handed me the letter, and I tied the ribbon around a small box they had found, a little wooden one that fit in the palm of my hand. I tied the bow slowly, my fingers working like they were threading love into something that could hold it. We placed the letter inside and closed the lid. We set the box next to the tiny sweater and the book about stars. We did not speak. We listened to the soft sounds of the house, to a car passing outside, to our own breathing. We looked at each other and nodded. It was enough. Later that afternoon, we went outside to the small garden behind their building. The sun lay warm on the ground. Daniel had a shovel. Sarah carried a young tree with bright green leaves. It was not big. It was a promise. "We thought a tree," she said, "for shade and for memory." I touched a leaf, and it bent and then sprang back, alive and brave. We chose a spot near the fence where the light fell in the morning. Daniel dug a hole, deep enough for roots to stretch. I knelt on the grass and crumbled a clump of soil between my fingers. It smelled like rain, though the sky was clear. We set the tree in the earth together. Sarah sprinkled water around it until the ground drank and settled. We did not say a lot. The wind said enough. It moved through the leaves and made a soft sound like whispering. Sarah took a small stone from her pocket. She had drawn a little star on it with a thin black pen. She placed the stone at the base of the tree, near the trunk, and patted the earth around it. We stood back and looked. I thought about love and the shapes it had taken in my life. I had once believed love meant doing and fixing and planning. Now I understood that love is not the same as control. I could be full of love and still keep my hands at my sides. I could be in the room and let another person choose what happens. I had learned that boundaries are not a rejection. They are a way to keep love safe. They are the line that says, "Here we can meet, both of us, and neither of us has to disappear." The day Daniel said, "Please stay out of this house forever," I heard a wall. Today I saw that he had asked for a door with a lock, and locks can be opened with trust. Sometimes the door you are kept from is guarding a room of tears. It does not mean you are unloved. It means the people inside are trying to hold their hearts together. If this happens to you, wait outside with your hand open. Sit on the step, breathe, and trust that when they are ready, they will invite you in. Bring nothing but your quiet and your hope. I am not less of a mother when I am quiet. I am still a mother in the way I listen now, in the way I sit and let the light move across a floor without moving a single spoon. The attic, what I found there, taught me to love my son and his wife in the way they need. It taught me that love can be strong and gentle and patient all at once. We visit the little tree sometimes. We stand and watch its leaves tremble in the wind. We touch the stone with the star. We speak softly or not at all. We know that life will keep bringing days, some easy and some heavy. We know we can face them together now, with a kind respect that holds. Thank you for sitting with me. Thank you for listening to this simple story of doors and keys, of soup and quiet, of a small box tied with a ribbon. I hope it finds you with a warm cup in your hands and time to breathe. If any part of this touched you, tell me where you are listening from in the comments. I will be here, reading with a warm cup in my hands.